after us in our dreams.
Had saved these clippings of the news story about some young men dying in the middle of severe nightmares. His father was a physician and had given him sleeping pills, and the kid supposedly was taking them, and they had come out of Southeast Asia war camps, so the family just assumed that he had been traumatized. And he said, no, it's different. There's something stalking me in my dream. I don't want to sleep. And he actually kept himself alive or awake.
You didn't sleep at all last night, did you? You know, the doctor says you have to sleep or you'll go even crazier.
And finally he fell asleep, and the family, carried him up to his bed and put him to bed. And the accounts afterwards, we were all relieved and felt like finally he can rest and sleep. And they went to their own beds and then heard screaming and, thrashing, and they ran into his room. And he was just screaming, kicking on his bed, and by the time they got to him, he just fell silent and he was dead. And then they found in his closet there was a coffee pot that he had hidden in there with black coffee, and they found all the sleeping pills. He hadn't taken any. And it was so dramatic. It was like, holy shit, this guy knew he was going to die if he slept. And you have to sleep.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
How terrifying is that?
In this case, this was a story about dreamers who, if they didn't wake up, which was very difficult to do with Freddie, they would be killed in their dreams, and there was going to be one hero, or heroine in this case, whose task was to figure out how to clear Freddie out of her life and out of the lives of all children without going to sleep.
I had sent the script all around to Hollywood. Everybody in Hollywood thought it was either dumb or too scary or not scary enough. I have a whole stack of wonderful letters that I keep, just to remind myself when things go rough. I got to say, to Bob's credit, is that he's the only person that I ran into that got it. And he got it right away, which I think is a real tribute to the man.
Difficulty was that since the bank wouldn't loan us money to make this movie, I had to not only undertake to develop the script, which I did, but then go out and try to raise the financing. You start off with a director and a script, but 8 weeks before you begin principal photography, all of a sudden there's 50 people working. You've got hairdressers and set designers and production coordinators and all kinds of other people, and they all have to be paid. So we had to pay them out of our own pocket solely on my belief that we could somehow pull this financing together. It was extremely harrowing and anxiety-provoking, all the bad stuff you want to experience watching a movie but not have in real life, because I couldn't wake up from it. It was just there every morning. Wes and I never could settle on an ending. Wes sort of thought I wanted Freddie driving the car because I wanted to have a sequel, but I wasn't even that sophisticated. So Wes and I continued to argue about this ending over and over and over. We had like 3 different endings that we shot. And we tested one, and then tested the other, and tested the third. None of them really were particularly satisfactory. What we finally decided to do, because different audiences had different points of view, is to end the film with all 3 endings. It wasn't satisfactory, but the audience seemed to like it. And I recall showing my father the movie, and he said, it's a really good movie, really exciting and scary and stuff. And there's a kind of a pause in our conversation. He said, but I don't like that ending. I said, well, Dad, we tried everything. We've done every kind of ending. We tried everything. He said, I don't care. You're going to screw up this movie. Don't end it that way. After we finished the film, we showed it to Frank Mancuso and the other people at Paramount. They called me up and said, we're sorry, we don't want to take this film because audiences are not interested in movies about dreams. So by default, we had to move ahead and distribute the film on our own. I remember driving by a big theater on Broadway in New York on opening night, and there was lines around the block. I'd never seen that with any of our films. It seemed to have worked.
Come to Freddie.
What Freddie holds in my heart is Robert Englund, who's a terrific trooper, a very good actor, a gentleman, and a certain amount of a scholar. So, and also I feel the same about Wes.
I mean, the whole thing of Nightmare on Elm Street really was based on Eastern philosophy that I was studying at that time. Most of us are down, at the bottom level where, we go about our daily lives and everything else, but we don't think about a lot of things. And then next up is, like businessmen, and then there's artists, and then there's mystics, and then and the farther up you go, the more uncomfortable it is. Just before the top, you get to a point where you either commit suicide, or you go back down, or you break through into real enlightenment. But you have to take, at that point, total responsibility for consciousness. And that was kind of what I built that whole thing around. And sleep, by that, is the paradigm of not being conscious. So in order to be conscious, the most primal things you had to do was stay awake. With some slasher films, I think it's just blood and guts and torture and things like that, which are pretty reliably upsetting, but I think kind of a cheat, To me, it's much more about the social, economic, psychological zeitgeist of what's going on in the culture at the time that I try to get at.